bringing sports, entertainment, and technology podcasts together. This is SPNT.
Irish Impact is brought to you by Stitcher Smart Radio. Download the Stitcher Smart Radio app today at stitcher.com/SPNT. What's going on, Irish faithful? 6-0. What a game in South Bend on Saturday as the Irish protect their house and knock off the Stanford Cardinal. As it was an exciting game in South Bend, a little rain-filled action, a little sloppy action, some sloppy quarterback play on both sides of the ball. But we have all kinds of stuff to talk about here on Episode 8 of Irish Impact. Glad you could join us. I'm Nick Suberling, joined alongside my co-host, Kevin Werner. Kevin, what's up, bud?
Wow, Nick, what a game.
I do it every time.
No.
Why don't I remember to unmute your mic? I'm like a professional.
What a game. Unbelievable, Saturday afternoon home game, college game day. The rain came in, and then it was one for the ages at home. I'll tell you that. I mean, a lot of heart attack moments, a lot of close calls, some bad action, some good action. But at the end of the day, 6-0.
6-0, which is the most important thing. And I think you and I, we talked about this last week on the episode, that really the defense was going to be a defensive struggle for both teams. And a very low-scoring affair, only 13 all after regulation. Really, if you think about it, Stanford's only touchdown came on an offensive miscue by the Irish. Yeah, they both defenses played outstanding.
Yeah, one thing you can take away from the game was that both defenses really brought their A game. Both offenses not so much, but maybe that's just because the defenses are that highly touted and that highly ranked nationally. Again, the Irish avoid giving up a defensive touchdown, still on the season, not since BC last year. So they're playing well. It's issues on the other side of the football we got to worry about.
And we'll get into that here on the podcast. Just a reminder, you could email us at irishimpact@spnt.tv. You can also give us a follow on Twitter. We are at Irish Impact. So we'll look back at the game against the Cardinal. Obviously, there's some issues that we need to talk about as far as the quarterback goes. You and I will have a nice little spirited debate when it comes to that. And then, of course, we have to welcome in the BYU Cougars. You can no longer say the Mountain West BYU Cougars. They are now independent. And
Joy and the Irish is one of the only independent teams in FBS football. And, they got a history. They've played plenty of times going back into the 90s. And so, it'll be another tough one, I think.
It'll be another tough one. Last time they came to town was back in 2005. So it's not somebody completely unfamiliar, but when you look at the first 6 games on the schedule, you could say that those 6 opponents are a little bit more familiar with the Irish.
Yeah, it's now a team they haven't played in some time, but they do have a history, and it should be another interesting game. And we'll break that one down a little later here on the show.
Absolutely. Before we get started, just a reminder that we record this show each and every Tuesday night live at spnt.tv/live at 9 o'clock Eastern. We'd love to see you in the chat room. Our good friend Jarrett's in there hanging out, tuning in, and he tunes in every week. And the Irish is what we talk about each and every Tuesday. So let's get right into this, Kev. The Stanford Cardinal coming in ranked 17. Believe it or not, the Irish were favorites and ranked ahead of them. The first time in quite a while, it seems, that has been the case. It was a defensive struggle throughout the entire game. You could argue that really the 2 miscues, both on the Irish side, the botched field goal attempt and then the sack touchdown.
The fumble into the end zone.
Given up by Golson in the end. Well, given up by the line and Golson in the end zone. Really prolonged things for the Irish. It should have been won in regulation, but the cool thing, and we saw this on the Icon video on YouTube through the Notre Dame Athletics, is Coach Kelly emphasizing at halftime, this is the first time you're down. You weren't gonna be in this situation all year. There was no way there was gonna be a time where you were behind. So it was cool to see them come back in the second half the way that they did.
Yeah, that's the thing to touch on. They were down by 10-3 at the half, and it was, as you said, the first time. And it was about, can these guys now adjust and see what they can do with their backs up against the wall? A lot of expectations coming into the game. College game day made their first appearance in South Bend in some time. And you really needed them to show what they could do. Adjustments were made. They came out, were able to tie the ball game in the second half, and then it was a little back and forth from there. And, into overtime they went. And, the rain was coming down in the stadium for a while. It was just it was a roller coaster to watch.
I know that your heart rate got up. Mine got up. because it was a very stressful game to watch as a fan. And it's when we have a mobile quarterback like we have, especially a young mobile quarterback like we have, there's going to be mistakes. And it was very clear on Saturday that though Golson may be our best option to win at the moment, you're still concerned by some of the fundamental plays that aren't being made, as far as throwing the ball away, getting out of bounds instead of trying to gain another 2 yards. I mean, we saw what happened a couple of those times, and really it could have been a lot worse. Thankfully that you have a defense that can keep you in games and it doesn't let Notre Dame get punished for those mistakes.
Yeah, because again, a young quarterback, and now put to the test with a big defense coming in like Stanford was, a top 25 opponent. The Irish were able to, yes, of course they did make mistakes, but again, they're able to overcome it and in the end walk away with the win. But I mean, hats again just go off to the defense. They made the plays. They really shut down Stanford's offense for the most part. Other than, the one touchdown was given up by the Notre Dame offense. So you have to just, again, hats off to the defense. They played another stellar performance. The secondary continues to impress with a lot of guys stepping into roles you did not, know if they'd be ready to do it, and they just keep stepping up to the challenge. And now Notre Dame moves a little higher in the rankings. Now the BCS talk starts to snowball. Things are getting interesting.
They are getting interesting. And you mentioned that secondary, Kevin, that Bennett Jackson, you were wondering early on in the game, okay, is this the drive where the streak ends? Are they going to give up the touchdown? Because they were moving the ball pretty well at that point, the Cardinal were. But Bennett Jackson read it great, picked him off at the goal line. You don't like him being down at the 1 yard line, but you'll take it.
You'll settle for it when it's an interception.
And then just a couple plays later, what do we have? A botched snap center exchange.
Yeah, the offensive line is really in the doghouse this week. I mean, a lot of credit to Stanford's defensive front. They're tough, but there was a lot of issues that came out where they just didn't seem to be able to block when there was a lot. They were sending pressure on Golson. They were going after the young quarterback to see how he played with the pressure in the rain. And there obviously were struggles, but he was running for his life on a lot of those plays early.
What a difference a week makes. The week before that, the offensive line gets the game ball, rushes for 346 yards against Miami. And then here against, the Stanford Cardinal, a lot of false starts. Mike Golick in particular, a lot of false starts there.
Penalties.
A lot of the penalties, a lot of missed assignments as far as who should block who. And then you have, which is really this is what really concerns me, is the lack of fundamentals when it comes to pass blocking. We saw a number of whiffs. You shouldn't ever whiff a guy you're supposed to block. I understand there are times it's going to happen, but it happened an awful lot.
And when you have this young quarterback in his first year starting, and he needs to be able to rely on the blocking for him to be able to build confidence in the pocket, throwing the football or choosing to run with his mobility. When he takes a snap, 2 steps later, there's a guy on his back. I mean, what's he supposed to do? It's tough.
It is tough. And, you got to give him some credit. And I think that's part of the reason, too, why Coach Kelly has decided to stick with him throughout the year, because he has that mobility. He can get – and they talked about it during the broadcast. What you get in Golson is a guy who, quick read, if it's not there, he wants to take off, which is great. But what you miss out on is the ability to read the defense pre-snap. There are a number of times, and you probably do it too, when you're watching a game, you see single coverage on Tyler Eifert. What do? Back shoulder on the sideline, you throw it up, let him go make a play. Well, but a lot of times he's not looking at Eifert. He's looking somewhere else, and he's not making the reads.
Well, I think he's also a little too locked into the point where I don't know if he's afraid to do it or he's told not to do it, but he does not seem to be comfortable audibling at all at the line of scrimmage. And that's one thing you see when Tommy Rees comes in. A lot of times he makes a read, makes a play call change. We're able to get some yardage that way through the air. When it's Golson, it seems like even when you can see the blitz is coming, they're going with what is at the line of scrimmage. Like he's uncomfortable changing the play call.
Right, and it was evident too in that last drive in regulation. There was a play where Reese took the snap, and he felt the coverage, meaning he threw it to a spot he knew his guy was going to be, rather than locking on. He made the throw. And it just the timing was there. You're not seeing that with Golson, and maybe that's because maybe he just doesn't have the confidence to do that yet. Maybe he doesn't have the repetition with the receivers. I don't know, but there's a clear, distinct difference between the two styles, and I guess now we can debate this.
Sure.
I think personally, I would much rather have somebody who's able to read the defenses and can move the ball through the air, because there's going to be times where, and we saw this on Saturday, teams are going to key in on the running game. They're going to make you beat them through the air, which is what Stanford did. And I felt like Golson wasn't making the plays through the air or making the correct reads through the air to really to capitalize on those situations, because there were times where there was single coverage on the outside, and for whatever reason, the plays just weren't made. He was taking sacks. He was, scrambling, should have stepped out of bounds. Whether or not he was out of bounds on the fumble or not is a moot point. Either way, it was a fumble. He could have easily avoided that by either sliding or getting out of bounds.
Oh, I'm not here to completely defend Everett Golson either. I will tell you the offensive line really struggled when they gave up that touchdown. That's a blindside hit. He had no time. Maybe you can argue he held onto the ball a little too long, but the blindside unprotected, when your quarterback's in the end zone, they have to be able to block better. But what you get with Golson, there was plenty of mistakes with the fumbles. Again, that one crucial one, after making such a great run downfield, to not have the mindset to just get out of bounds.
Right.
Why fight for an extra half a yard when you're the starting quarterback, so you don't want to get hit, and it's not really worth that extra yard when you're going to put the ball in jeopardy to get loose. But, I mean, then we saw that play was all about the pros and cons, because we saw what he's capable of doing, but then he makes the mistake at the end of it. Because with his feet and his mobility, I mean, Stanford was on him all game. I'm curious if Tommy Rees was the starter during the ball game. I don't think he would have time to throw. Golson was making a lot of time with his mobility, threw a couple passes off his back feet, one big one to Eifert early on where he just took a snap, two backpedal, and just had to fling one.
Right.
And it was actually on the money. But he was fighting for his life. But then when he did have time, there was a lot of times that he was indecisive.
But you can argue, too, that Rees makes time for himself because he knows pre-snap where to put the ball, where to get his players in the right position. Like you said, he does call audibles at the line of scrimmage, and he makes time that way. He doesn't take a lot of sacks. Now, he took a big sack in overtime. Again, huge whiff by that tight end on the block on Chase Thomas, but still and maybe we have it right the way it's going right now with Coach Kelly. You have your guy, and if you need Rees, you have him in your back pocket.
Well, one thing we noticed, and we talked about Tommy Rees calling audibles, but another element to that, it seems like they expand the playbook a little more when he's in the ball game, where Golson, again, younger, learning each week. We always hear Coach Kelly talk about it in press conferences that, he's only knows so much. He's moving along slowly, and when Tommy Rees comes in, they seem to be more open to taking risky pass plays downfield. But I'm not sure if that's an element of Golson just holding on to the ball too long. But it's a decent situation to be in, to have a veteran that can come in and be able to take care of business, because now we have 3 games this year where he's had to step up. The Purdue game got him down there for the win. Michigan, I'm going to say the horrible term, he managed the game. But,
the cliche.
But and then in this one, Golson actually got hurt because a lot of people were calling for Rees early on in the ball game. I still don't think the safety, I don't put that on Golson, but there are people were calling for Rees.
Safety, you mean touchdown?
Well, the touchdown, well, I wish it should have been a safety if he could have held onto the football. But what happened then, Tommy Rees, you started hearing them call for him, and they were surprisingly sticking with Golson because a lot of people just assumed we'd see Tommy Rees start the second half.
I did too.
And then Golson came out, and the only reason he ended up getting taken out of the ballgame was he suffered a concussion. So Coach Kelly was willing to go with him and see if he could take his lumps and fight his way through it. And at the end, he didn't know if he could or not because he got injured.
Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts because it is an interesting debate. It's a debate that here in Notre Dame country, we really haven't had all too often of late. We've had – we had Jimmy Clausen for 3 years, and we knew he was the guy. We had Brady Quinn before him. He was the guy. So, really, it's been a long time coming since we've had a quote-unquote quarterback controversy. And I wouldn't necessarily – please, don't take it as me saying that there's a quarterback controversy because I don't think there is. I like Everett Golson. I think he's the quarterback of the future. But I personally – I just would have pulled him a little sooner in the game. Clearly, he wasn't able to move the ball through the air. And was having
the offense entirely, completely was struggling as a whole. And
let's give credit to Stanford's defense, too. That had a lot to do with it.
Because the one thing we didn't see, which, again, maybe just got spoiled in Chicago, taking on the Hurricanes, but the running game was not there on Saturday. And it was kind of a head-scratcher. I know they were putting a lot of pressure in there, but Notre Dame did not seem to be able to get the right play calls in to execute on the ground, and it was very lacking. And then they tried to start using Golson for his mobility. That opened it up a little bit, but it doesn't help when it's pouring in the stadium either.
Right, pouring down rain. The conditions weren't great. It seemed to be that the few run plays that did work were the options to the outside, where he was able to pitch the ball.
A couple of those quick pitches.
And now were a couple that Golson whiffed on that he should have had and should have read.
Well,
a couple
he should have when he had the option read, and there was a couple where he probably should have pitched, or there was another time he should have kept the ball. And I think that just comes back to his young quarterback, indecisive, because those plays could have been for a lot more. I know the one when he decided to pitch, he had the clear lane there to take it upfield for probably at least a first down.
But it's a cool debate to have here. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So send us your emails. We want to hear, who would you rather have at quarterback? Is it Tommy Rees or is it Everett Golson? Email us at irishimpact@spnt.tv.
Yeah. One thing that was concerning with the offense, just to talk about the running game real quick. I mean, I know I've been saying it all season. You have the three different guys you go to, but Everett Golson had the most carries in this ballgame.
And I don't know, that could have been a byproduct of the offensive line, missing a lot of blocks. It could have been, like we said, Stanford's a very good run defense. They were built for this. So
I don't think we saw Atkinson enough. A
whole lot, no.
He only had 3 carries, and after what he had done in the Shamrock Classic in Chicago, I mean, there was just a lot of buzz about his speed, and then we really didn't see it at all Saturday.
Could have just been the game plan. Who knows? He may have had an injury. We're not really sure. But you're right. The running game, after running for as many yards as they did the week before, it was a little disconcerting to see it kind of fall back a little bit against Stanford. Again, totally different beasts. The Stanford Cardinal are a much, much better club than the Miami Hurricanes.
Oh, it was a well-fought game. I mean, that's the thing. Expectation was so high after what they did to Miami, but Miami's not the Miami of 10 years ago that won national titles.
Very true.
So, I mean, Stanford, a much more formidable foe, and it was a real tough ball game. No doubt.
The one play I want to get to real quick, which is obviously the controversial one, I guess you can call it that, was the 4th down play in overtime. Stephen Taylor for Stanford, 4 straight carries up the gut, couldn't get a yard. Now, I personally thought that during that play that his forward progress had stopped, and then now he wasn't down on the ground, but his progress had been stopped, and then he reached over, and then he looked like he crossed the goal line. Then it looked like he fumbled. It was tough to tell where the whistle blew, for one, and two, you can't review forward progress, so what are they gonna do?
Well, what it looked like, and even slowing down, watching it over, several times, right there live at the game, and then afterwards, it looked to me like the whistle blew, and then Notre Dame guys stopped pursuit, and that's when he crawled forward. But the play at that point had been blown dead, and you see Teo running off the field. He's moving like he still thought the play was live, and maybe he didn't hear the whistle, but some of the offensive guys heard it. A lot of Notre Dame defensive players heard it, and the play was down. And, I mean, a lot of people for Stanford obviously upset about it. If Notre Dame was in that position, we'd probably have a gripe about it. But the referees made the call, and once the whistle's blown, the play is dead. It doesn't matter what happens after that.
Yeah, you're right. Again, and that's not even reviewable. So I'm not sure what they went to the booth for. I'm glad the play stood.
Well, I mean, last play of the game, you at least have to take a look at it.
Yeah, you have to take a look. You and I both agree then that was clearly not a touchdown.
No.
Okay.
I mean, I said
I know
you can argue he moved it across the line after the fact, but again, Notre Dame guys aren't even trying to make the stop at that point. I mean,
I know what you mean.
You can do a lot after the whistle's dead if you think you're still advancing the football.
To show you how much of a hater Mark May is, he said during the college game day final, Mark May,
not a hater.
Said that the refs got it wrong in typical Mark May fashion.
Mark May would pick us to lose to a JV high school team with a straight face.
But he did say if Notre Dame were to win the table that he thought that they would be in the BCS title game. Again, baby steps here. We got to worry about one game at a time.
That show is so it's very interesting college football debate when Mark May and Lou Holtz talk, but it is relevant to Notre Dame fans because Lou Holtz is the biggest homer, and Mark May is the biggest hater.
Clearly.
So what they say about our game each Saturday is just irrelevant nonsense.
Do you enjoy the final verdict?
When they put
they
put him in the judges' outfit.
Tacky. Sorry.
Well, my favorite, and it's college, it's NFL related, but nothing funnier than when they do the Nostra Ditka, Ebenezer Ditka.
Oh man, we've clearly deviated from the show. It comes to a screeching halt here. So let's talk a little bit about this defense, Kev, because the fact they haven't given up a touchdown since September 8th against Purdue. They haven't given up a rushing touchdown all year. We keep going back to it, and before the show tonight, we were looking up, YouTube clips of famous goal line stands in Notre Dame history, and you got your Ivory Cunningham, Covington.
Yeah.
You've got who was the other one?
Deke Cooper against Boston College.
I mean, both classic goal line stands, and if you had to rank one over those, I'll just throw those two out there.
My favorite's Ivory Covington because he's just a little guy, and he picks up about a 240-pound tight end. I mean, ND fans YouTube that clip. It's against Army back in '96, and the Army scores a touchdown to make it 28-27. They go for two. It's just before overtime.
Right.
And they go for the win, and they do just a little rollout, flip it to the tight end at the 1-yard line, and Covington just somehow stuffs him. And he's about 5'9", 150.
Yeah, he was definitely a lot smaller than the tight end for sure, but it was pretty cool to see. And it was really cool to see some of the coaches on the sideline. You've got your Urban Meyers on the Notre Dame sideline with Bob Davie. Pretty cool to see, at least for me.
Very nostalgic. But I mean, first thing I thought of during that Stanford win was the Deke Cooper stop they did, I think, in '98 at Boston College.
That one was a clear, he's not even close to the goal line. This one was a little more sketchy.
Yeah, well, that one was, both of those were just clear stops, but they're still, when you're watching those games back then and back in those days, I still nail biters.
Yeah. But this week, obviously, the Irish defense has just been phenomenal. Stanford really, if you think about it, my bold prediction last week was that Stanford would not have a 100-yard rusher. Just barely. Taylor had a $102.
Yeah, they finished the game with about 147 on the ground, but the Notre Dame's defense, especially the secondary, again, held them to just 125 passing for Nunez, 12 for 25. And Notre Dame stopped Stanford a lot on third downs. I mean, the defense is...
They had 2 interceptions. Yeah. Bennett Jackson had one. Farley had the other one.
And of course, the big one at the goal line. Yeah.
Right. So you've got, a defense playing probably the best defense I've seen a Notre Dame team play in probably, 10 years, maybe more?
Yeah, I mean, the last time they were very good defensively was the last time they were really – I mean, they got into the top 10 when they had Brady Quinn for those first couple years with Charlie Weiss. But when Ty Willingham –
They were outscoring people, though.
Ty Willingham's first season, they started, I think, 8-0. And the offense really struggled back then, but it was a defensive mindset. But I think this defense is even better, especially with a lot of these teams the way college football's developed into shootouts now. And Notre Dame's one of the few teams out there that plays defense.
And I'm surprised. They're going into the season, the question marks really were going to be the secondary because they had so many injuries back there. But now, like you're
it was inexperienced to begin with,
right? Yeah. And you're not seeing teams. I shouldn't say not seeing teams. I think Purdue moved the ball through the air. Navy kind of did. But I thought Stanford would throw more. I really did. And maybe it's because they don't have the weapons on the outside and they clearly only rely on their play-action tight ends. But we keep – I feel like we're beating a dead horse here, but each and every week the secondary continues to impress me.
Well, what do you think of the defense continues to get other teams off the field quickly? They're doing about 40% of all drives that go 3 and out. So Notre Dame doesn't really let people develop long drives. And when teams have gotten down near the red zone, big turnovers have happened. And, I mean, the linebacker core you can't say enough about. Obviously, Manti Te'o's everyone's favorite.
Right.
He's a complete beast back there in the middle. But, I mean, the front four are doing their part, and then the linebackers are doing coverage over the middle, or they're doing what they need to when they go on blitzes. And the secondary, as you already said, just continues to play great coverage. And not only just stop plays, create turnovers.
They create turnovers, which is the most important thing. And again, it's amazing how this works, Kev. Well, in this game we did turn the ball over quite a bit, but they're limiting compared to a year ago. They have limited the mistakes on offense as well, which certainly helps your defense.
Last year Notre Dame was the team turning it over. Now they're getting the turnovers, and that's really helping them out, especially with the offense not playing as well as they could in some of these ball games.
The most important thing, though, Kev, 6-0. Moving on this week to the Cougars of BYU. We'll talk about that game here in just a bit. Just a reminder, though, you can rate and review the show on iTunes. We'd love to hear your feedback, whether it's good or bad. So just give us a shout there on the iTunes store. Just do a keyword search for Irish Impact. We've got a lot of great reviews so far. So if you haven't had a chance, do it through the iTunes store or through the podcasts app. If you're an iOS user, an iPhone or iPod Touch, you can also review the show via the podcasts app in the iTunes store as well. So make sure you check that out. I'm trying to think. We're also on the Zune Marketplace and Stitcher Smart Radio. Check us out there. And like I said earlier in the show, we record the show each and every Tuesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern Time at spnt.tv. Kev, do you have a shout-out?
No, I don't have one right now.
I do.
No.
Shout out.
Okay. This is to one of our newer fans of the podcast. His name's Alfredo Rodriguez. He follows us on Twitter. He's at @ND_Fredo. He sent us a tweet last week. It says, I found you through Hamilton. That's a reference to Brian Hamilton from the Chicago Tribune who visited the show last week. Great job, you guys. Absolutely great. I will do my best to promote the show. Alfredo, if you're listening, thanks a bunch, and go Irish. So there's a shout-out.
Well, here I got a shout out.
Oh,
I can dig up a Twitter follower myself. We got Neil Fisher now following us on. He's a Notre Dame fan. He says he's the real deal, Neil Fisher.
All right.
He's an ND fan and follows us on Twitter and hopefully listens to the podcast.
Well, if you want to be shouted out here on the podcast, hit us up on Twitter at Irish Impact. And, of course, you can also send us your emails at irishimpact@spnt.tv. Little confusion there. irishimpact@spnt.tv is the email address. Hit us up there. We'd love to hear your feedback, whether it's good or bad. So one thing before we get to the BYU game, and I got this from our friends over at herloyalsons.com. It was an interesting blog post about the rushing of the field on Saturday. I don't know if you caught it or noticed it, but fans did rush the field. And from the blog post, it sounds like it was the underclassmen doing the rushing, whereas some of the upperclassmen are going, we're the favorites. We were supposed to win. What's your take on the rushing of the field? I understand it was an exciting game, an exciting finish, but
I don't know. I think when it's a big home game, you're playing a ranked opponent, and you get into overtime, a lot of bets are off. And then I think you're talking about completely excited 18 to 19-year-old college kids, and I don't mind it. I think it's fine. It was a big win for Notre Dame.
It was a big win. I agree. And we come from a college at Bowling Green where there were few wins to come by early on in our college career, and then Urban came along, and we rushed the field for Toledo when we knocked off Toledo and to get us to 8-3 on the year or something like that. So I understand there's some excitement. You've been partying all day, and it was a great finish. But at the same time, it's like we're Notre Dame, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's that. I can totally understand that argument, too. I mean, you're supposed to, again, you said you're the favorite. You're supposed to take care of business as your top 10 team. They're just ranked in the top 20. But the way that game comes down to such a stop, I can't blame anyone for getting that excited. I know I was going ecstatic in my living room watching the game with my brothers. So I mean, and I was just hanging out in the living room in Toledo, Ohio. So I can imagine what you're doing if you're sitting there against the wall and they make stops like that.
Jared in the chat room says this is such a dumb debate. I'm paraphrasing. They celebrated. What's wrong with that? Now, I get it. I do understand. And like I said, I probably would have rushed the field too. I just thought it was an interesting article there at herloyalsons.com. I'll make sure I post a link to the blog post in our show notes as well. But
I mean, I'm fine with it.
So there you go. All right, let's look ahead to BYU this week. The Cougars coming off of a rough one against another undefeated team here in the Pac-12 in Oregon State, who's not too far behind Notre Dame in the BCS rankings. I believe if they're not 6-0, I think they're 5. Either way, they're undefeated.
They're ranked 10th. It's encouraging if you're a Notre Dame fan because BYU's been ranked, highly touted for their defense. They still are ranked 7th in the country, allowing 13.6 a game. But last week they finally showed a little chink in the armor, gave up 42 points.
Not only did they give up 42 points, Kev, they gave it up to a first-time starting quarterback in Oregon State who had not seen any game action this year. And for a guy who comes off the bench to be able to play the way he had a fantastic game, over 300 yards passing, against, like you said, a BYU Cougar team, 42 points at, I believe that was in.
It was a home game, and that's another concerning issue for them to host a big game like that. But, I mean, looking at their schedule, that's one loss. Their other two are to Utah, 24-21, and then Boise State beat them 7-6. Boise's back in the top 25, ranked 24th. So those are the two teams that
the Boise State final was 7-6, really?
7-6.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow, that's surprising.
Yeah, back on September 20th.
Wow.
So they've played two ranked teams, and one they just lost by a point, and then the other one they kind of got handled at home. So it's hard to take anything away from their wins, victories over Washington State, Weber State, Hawaii, and Utah State. I mean, we're talking.
Right.
I think I just named what used to be the WAC.
So they're 4-2,
4-3.
4-3. Yeah, so I don't think there's going to be any
they're
problems
not.
there.
I mean, everything statistically for them comes out like this. They're ranked about 68th in the country passing, so middle of the pack. They're 52nd overall in rushing yards, not 80th in points for. Their main thing is their defense, and again, last week it was the first time it did not, really look impressive. But they come in ranked 7th overall defensively, and so that's one thing to be concerned about, especially after we saw Notre Dame's offense struggle last week.
Yeah, but I think this is the kind of game that's going to get you back on track. We don't know. I know Golson missed a couple practices this week with the concussion. From all accounts, it sounds like he may be back. I'm not sure.
Yeah, with it being Tuesday, folks, it's just a little too early to know for sure what's going to happen as the week moves on.
But still, this is a BYU team. And again, if you want to take the next step in your progression as a college football team, and if you want to be considered elite and a championship caliber team, this is a game that you need to win on your home turf. You cannot have a let up here, especially with the big one looming right behind you.
Yeah, I mean, it's important not to look ahead with Oklahoma on the road next week. So they need to really focus, like you said, here at home, bring in the Cougars, and hopefully just take care of business.
This is like I said, they gave up 42 points to an Oregon State team. It is a big Pac-12 opponent, but still 42 points at home is a tough pill to swallow. You know they're going to be ready to come back this week and have a much better performance on defense. But if there's one key to this game, looking ahead to Saturday against BYU, for the offense, for Notre Dame's offense, what do you think that would be?
I think they're going to have to get back to basics with trying to run the football. It's going to be difficult against BYU, but I think they want to try to do what they did against Miami. And I'm not expecting for 366 yards.
Right.
I'm expecting them to play ball control. What they did that was most impressive to me against Miami was they had the ball much longer than the Hurricanes in the ball game, and that's what they need to do it here at home. Just play ball control, get the running game back to work. Hopefully the offensive line can get their act together. I mean, between poor blocking and penalties,
right,
that was the real difference. There was a lot of false starts, some holdings, but I think if they can run the football, then it'll open up a little bit of passing. But I'm not expecting a ridiculous amount of points on the board this week.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I'm expecting the complete opposite.
You think they're going to blow it up?
I think it's going to be a lot of points. I think Coach Kelly is one of the best coaches when it comes to looking at the opponents and knowing their weaknesses and taking advantage of that. But really the question mark, it's tough because of Golson's play on Saturday. You don't know how he is mentally and physically. After a concussion. But the nice thing is you've got a guy in Rees in your back pocket that you can bring out if you need to. I predicted that the Irish probably have, I'm guessing, 35 points or more.
You think they go over 30?
I think they do. I think they'll also rush for over 200.
I think we're going to see that'd be nice. I can get behind that if that goes down. But what I think we're going to see is, again, the defense will just have to step up, play tough D. The offense will be more productive than they were against Stanford, but I still see it just as like I'll take the Irish in this one. Like I'll say 24-6.
24-6. So
I almost said 10, but I'm thinking we're not getting no touchdowns. Let's just keep it rolling.
Yeah, and it's been tough to predict these scores. And I'll have to go back and listen. I meant to do that to see what we said last week as far as the scores go. Mm-hmm. But I'll say...
I want to say I had it like, I think 28-20, 27-21, something like that. So I was close in the point difference, but I thought both offenses would be better. Again, the defenses really showed up last week.
That's why I think when you look at the offensive line, Stanford's a really, really good defense.
And so is BYU.
Well,
statistically, when you just they haven't played anybody other than Oregon State, and if you want to count Boise, and they held Boise to 7.
All right,
so
maybe.
But I think we're going to see the Irish score more. But I think you're 35. That might be your bold prediction.
I'll go 35. You said 24-6.
24-6. I'll take that final.
Oh, I'll go. Okay, so my bold prediction is they'll rush for 200 yards, and that they win 35-9.
My bold prediction will be that of the 24 points, at least 7 of them will be scored by the defense. Pick 6 or so.
There you go. That's a good one. Okay.
So
the defense hasn't scored a touchdown since what, Navy?
Yeah, but I think you're right.
Yeah, because
Tuitt had that run.
Right. So we'd love to hear your thoughts as far as our bold predictions and your scores for the game. Hit us up. You can email us irishimpact@spnt.tv. So you go 24-6.
24-6.
And I say 35-9. Interesting.
Either way, we both have them winning comfortably.
winning, going on to 7-0. You can't count your chickens before they hatch. I am very guilty of that last week. I'll tell you what, and I'll just a personal note before we wrap up here. Thank God for Notre Dame last week, because I had probably the worst week in my sports life.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Ever. The Reds lose 3 in a row to get knocked out of the postseason. The Bengals bookend their week by losing to Miami and losing poorly to the Browns. Thank God. Thank God Notre Dame won on Saturday night, because I don't know what I would have done. I really don't.
I had a stressful weekend because both games that I was rooting for were very close. The Irish coming out on top and won. The Eagles, that's my NFL team, blowing a lead to the Lions. And how old is Jason Hansen at this point?
He's up there. He's at least 42, maybe even 43.
I swear that guy's in Tecmo Bowl.
He might. Wow. He might be.
I think he is.
Wow. I'm sorry, man.
But, I mean, yeah, well, at least it
was the Lions.
Well,
the Browns?
The one thing I don't mind about the NFL is your team can lose 7 games and win the Super Bowl. College football,
good point.
You got to keep rolling.
Keep rolling.
I'll take that Irish win every time.
Absolutely. Let's hope that they keep going up. BYU this weekend in South Bend, and then, of course, we got the big one against the Sooners coming up after that. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Again, email us at irishimpact@spnt.tv. Leave us some reviews on iTunes. We'd love to hear your feedback and get us help improve our ranking in the iTunes store as far as the podcasts go. And looking forward to a big Irish win on Saturday against the Cougars. Kev, it's been grand, and I'm looking forward to next Tuesday.
Without a doubt, win one for the Gipper.
Absolutely. That's going to wrap up this episode of Irish Impact. Irish Impact is an SPNT production. For more information about our other podcasts, log on to spnt.tv. For my co-host, Kevin Werner, I'm Nick Struberling. We'll see you next time on Irish Impact. Irish Impact is an SPNT production. For more information about our other podcasts, log on to spnt.tv.